above surface and subsurface. There's the electronic battle space. There's even space.
Yep.
And what you tend to find is as the participants are either successful or unsuccessful in one of those areas, they will start focusing on others. There's an old, you don't reinforce failure in war. And if you follow a sort of Soviet type doctrine where you concentrate on two or three axes, you reinforce the successful axis or axes and pile your resources in there. I think the reason that we're seeing a sort of focus on lawfare, a focus on information operations, is that in the real world conflict, where the road does meet the road, where people do die, where the consequences are manifest for functioning human existence.
Yep.
The Palestinian pro-Iran Islamic regime entities are losing and manifestly losing. I think the browbeating that goes on about how poor.
Okay, for everyone who's here, thanks for coming. I'm finishing up the actual X space, and then I'll be right back in here. So stand by.
Recognition that it's much easier for false narratives to be put out quickly than it is for accurate narratives. I mean, I was reading today that you'll recall there was a strike on an NGO convoy a couple of days ago, I think 4 or 5 days ago. It turns out that the vehicle that the Israelis struck had 4 armed Gaza inhabitants in it who had approached the NGO to offer them safe conduct. And the Israelis had already identified them as Hamas members.
Yeah.
But, they weren't able to say that at the time. They had to do their investigation. So 4 days after the narrative that the Israelis had hit another aid convoy.
Enjoy the music, guys. We'll be right here.
Gazan civilians. I think, just going back to the lawfare point and to the point I'm making, is that, you will see a concentration on information operations and lawfare become more and more evident as the actual real conflict on the ground, the military element goes against the Islamic regime and its agents. The fact that Iran can't do anything to Israel is exposing its weakness every day, and you see it's sort of online backers saying, "Oh, well, tonight's the night we're going to fire thousands of missiles at Israel." It's nonsense, but it's the sort of unreal element of the war taking precedence on their side as opposed to the real conduct of the war.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that, and I think that's probably a good place to close it down. Unless Dr. Fungi, you have any other comments? Thank you.
It's going to be difficult to say something after such an eloquence. Fusilier is always great. I just want to say one thing. Thank you very much, Brian, for this very interesting space. I just want to thank also all the speakers. Fusilier, I learned a lot when talking to you. You should do more podcasts or whatever, because you're such an eloquent speaker.
Hey, we're working on him, Dr. Fungi. We're working on him.
Oh, that's great. Also, I want to thank Aristotle. It's always a pleasure listening to him. I learned a lot, and Sharon and the other speaker. And happy to kind of co-host another space that you're willing to organize. And I wish you a very a great after show. I think it's gonna be good. And hoping to participate next time, but it's really late.
Understood. The most difficult part about this whole process is figuring out the time zone so we can have all our friends participate, but we'll work it out. I'm actually now speaking both on this X space and also on the StreamYard space. So if you guys look up in the Nest, there should be a link, maybe Fusilier or somebody tell me if that link is there, where you can click and join us. Audio, video, you can turn off your video if you want. You can also join on X. You'll see it's in the spaces right now. There's 92 people here. But if you join on X, there'll be a delay in when you message us. So take your pick. But hope to see you guys all there. I'm going to leave this space up in case people want to click on the hyperlink to get to StreamYard with us. And I'm going to mute my mic. And thanks, everybody. See you next time. All right. Well, I think you guys probably all heard the closing down of our X space. I know you're loving that daydreaming background music. Let me kill that. I see some folks here who are braving the potential audio video participation here. Let me kill this background music because it's kind of annoying. I'm going to bring some folks up now. Again, if you're on X and you're seeing this, you're going to be able to participate. You'll be able to message us, but we won't be able to answer you on X. We'll have to answer you here. This actually worked out pretty well the other day. We had a good time. Won't be long, probably be about an hour. And I'll try to be watching my DMs on X, but again, there is going to be a delay. So if we don't get to you right away, it's because of that. So welcome Juki, welcome Laurel, welcome Eitan, welcome Laura. I see Juki and I are only two that are willing to have our ugly face on here. Just me, not you. Oh, wait, hold on. Sorry, there's a whole nother row of people. Hang on. Look at this. Democrats is here, adding her to the stage. Oh, we got a bunch of people.
Oh, she's awesome. I love Democrats.
Okay.
I just didn't scroll down far enough. Look at that. Wow, welcome. Saul's here. Let me see. Yeah, everybody's here. Love it. Nobody needs to feel like they have to go on video. It's totally fine if you don't want to. But
yeah, I'm gonna delete mine.
we had a great time the other night, and I think it's a little bit more intimate. It's a little bit more informal. And also, by the way, guys, this is broadcasting to my LinkedIn account and also the Hidden History Happy Hour YouTube site. So we might get people from all of these different sources, which is fun. Now, look, I got to scroll down because there's a bunch more people. Hang on, adding you to the stage. I think this will take 100 people on stage. I'm not entirely sure. 10 people on screen, it's telling me. Well, that's a bummer. I guess I need to upgrade. All right. So people that were in the last space, any thoughts on the ICC discussion that we just had?
Well, I think that the ICC clearly doesn't have jurisdiction. Kareem Khan is compromised, and it's just for show to lend the legitimacy to anybody being critical of Israel and trying to create a moral equivalence. That's my analysis.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and I think it's above all else, it's an.
Lost you there for a second. Above all else, it's what?
I think above all else, it's an information operation enabler.
100%. It's no different than like Human Rights Watch or Amnesty and their campaigns against Israel. It's just lending legitimacy to demonizing Israel, and the powers that have so much influence over those organizations with Qatari money and all that. I don't see how anybody can get. If you weren't in it and you didn't know anything about the conflict, it would be so easy to sway somebody against Israel with all these, organizations that seem so prestigious coming down on Israel like they are.
Yeah, and that's the problem, right? Is it just enables all that. So I I literally just upgraded my plan here on StreamYard to supposedly add some more people to the stage. So anybody who wasn't able to get on a minute ago, hopefully you can get up now. Oh, I have to return to my dashboard first. I'm sorry, you guys. We're flying this plane while we're building this plane while we're flying it. So I apologize. I think that we're in this moment now where we've talked about this before with Fusilier and John Spencer and others. We're in this moment where there is a possibility that a country could win the war on the battlefield and lose it in the information space. And not that it's a brand new thing. Some would argue that in Vietnam, the U.S. was actually winning the war, but we stopped fighting it because of domestic political pressure. You can argue that point, but I think it's much more apparent now that Israel's experiencing stopped fighting it because of domestic political pressure. You can argue that point, but I think it's all right. I'm having a problem because I'm hearing my own echo from X, so I'm going to close. What am I going to do? I'm going to mute that mic over there. Sorry again, guys. We're just, like I said, building this plane while we're flying it. Laura was there. I don't know if Laura wants to speak, but we always value your opinion. What, if you want to speak, what did you think of our discussion?
I think everyone was pretty much on point, left or right. Like it just made sense. When you look back, I always go back to Putin and everything that happened there. The ICC, they had also, there's an arrest warrant for him, but nothing's happening. So there's something there. I was looking into Khan as well as to who he is and represented. So I'm just still kind of researching on him, but I just found it interesting who he represented in retrospect as well. In the past, that's always something that I think everybody should look into because there are some iffy things there that just kind of doesn't make sense. So.
Yeah, it's a good point. Let me just make a couple thoughts about that. And I'm not looking at the comments yet, guys. So sorry. I will start looking at them now. There's a fierce debate in the U.S. right now where we're trying to undermine the credibility of our political candidates by looking at the people that work with them and if they're lawyers or they're activists or they're political operators, who they used to work for. And it's a valid concern. It's a political discussion that we should have. But I will say, as an attorney, oftentimes you wind up representing people or organizations that you do not necessarily agree with, either because you work for a big law firm and you're a junior on the list and they tell you that's who you're going to work for and your only option is to quit, or because you believe in their cause but you learn something later and you change your mind, or because in some cases you're just a mercenary and you'll just be a gun for hire, metaphorically. So I kind of think in the U.S. right now in our political process, we're making a little bit too much of that. It's a valid political point to bring up, but I certainly represented, well, look, my first job in government was I worked on the Senate campaign of a very, very liberal Democrat who would really have made Ted Kennedy blush at how liberal he was. And, he won his race in Iowa where I worked for him. And I went to Washington with him. And that was my first job. Now, I don't agree with almost anything that guy stood for today in 2024. This was almost 40 years ago. And, there's this famous saying that a conservative under 30 has no heart and a liberal over 30 has no brain. So I think we're a little bit less forgiving than we should be in American politics right now about things that you worked for, causes you worked for, people you represented. 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. But I don't know. People disagree with me on that. By the way, I see a lot of people I want to bring up. I thought I upgraded. I'm still working on it, so it will happen soon, hopefully. Let's talk about something else, honestly. Let's just to summarize, and then we'll move on. We had a discussion in the X space around Andrew Fox's excellent editorial, which you can find on Substack, where he talked about the current situation at the International Criminal Court with regard to Israel and Hamas. We talked about I think, very strong legal arguments that the ICC has no jurisdiction over Israel since they're not a signatory to the treaty that created the ICC. We also talked about how, at least based on publicly available information, the facts that the ICC prosecutor alleged in his request for an arrest warrant are not only false, but demonstrably false based on public information. And we talked about the effort in the UK by a lawyers organization to get the prosecutor at the ICC actually disbarred, to take his license, because he was continuing to pursue this case where the facts just didn't bear it out. And we had a pretty wide-ranging discussion. We had a lot of people of different viewpoints, and I think it was helpful. And hopefully, people felt like they were heard, and we took all the points into consideration. And if you can't tell, I'm stalling right now because I'm trying to figure out how to bring more people up. And I thought I upgraded my plan, but here's what we're going to do. Anyone who's on stage right now who wants to say something, please do. And if you don't say something, I'm going to move you down and bring some other people up because I can't figure out how to get the maximum people up I'm allowed to. So anybody who's on stage want to speak, please do. And by the way, about anything, it doesn't have to be the ICC.
Is this working? Hello, testing.
Yeah. We got you, Saul.
Yeah, somebody brought up the point of follow the money and this and why do the NGOs hate Israel so much? And I'm following a guy called Texas Paul Schroeder, and what he did is he looked up these NGOs and where their headquarters are and what their salaries are. And he found out like Human Rights Watch, for instance, their headquarters is in New York City in Manhattan in the Empire State Building. Very expensive real estate.
Yep.
Salaries are very big, and they fundraise on how terrible Israel is. They are the organization that invented the phrase open air prison. So it's in their monetary interest that Israel is viewed as terrible, horrible, and we have to fund Human Rights Watch to combat this stuff. And this, this explains a lot to me because I wouldn't have known that. Not naively, a naive person thinks that Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, these are humanitarians only interested in the betterment of mankind, and why would they be prejudiced against Israel? They're prejudiced against Israel because it's in their monetary interest. They fundraise based on saying how terrible Israel is.
Can I just add something really quickly? The founder of Human Rights Watch, Robert Bernstein, who has since passed, wrote an op-ed in the New York Times. If you look it up, it's something like Human Rights or Lost on the Middle East or Mideast or something like that, where he talks about how anti-Semitism has become the cause, basically, or anti-Israelism has become the cause of the organization that he founded, a Jewish man founded. So you can look that up. It's still widely available. Robert Bernstein, Lost in Mideast. If you Google that, it's New York Times. But that is pretty eye-opening.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. And this is obviously something that infects American domestic politics as well. That, put your money where your mouth is, right? The funding of politicians a lot of times controls what their positions are. We've had some very dramatic examples of this recently in the United States, but I won't go into them because I don't want make this chillish space partisan. But very good point. Someone else who's on stage want to speak, because I'm going to start moving people around. All right. Very good. Very good. Very good.
Hello.
Yeah,
Brian,
go
you
ahead.
can-
Yeah,
you
go
can-
ahead.
You can move me down to listener because I don't have too much to say right now.
Okay, thank you
But-
very much. Who are you, though? I can't see who's talking.
it's Laurel.
Okay, all right. Oh, the brick wall. Yeah.
No, I'm just another brick in the wall.
Yeah, it's an excellent song. Excellent song. All right, next time I
Okay.
bring someone up, I'll move you down. Thank you, Laurel. Thanks for joining us.
Yep.
Appreciate it. All right, Fuck Tyrants is up. I always like to just say Fuck Tyrants because it's fun. What do you have to say, Mr. Fuck Tyrants?
Hey, Brian. I just wonder why isn't the media, or at least the government, not putting any service announcements to say, watch out for this kind of propaganda or misinformation. So there's nothing I can think of that they're putting out information to the general public. Is there a reason for that?
Sorry, say that one more time.
So usually, when there is misinformation or in times like this when uncertainty is about, usually they put public announcements to say, watch out for this kind of disinformation and watch out for that. So they give some examples to keep people informed. But I haven't seen anything like it, whether it be it for Israel or Ukraine. Does that make sense at all?
Yeah, so you're talking about government public diplomacy, right? Like Voice of America or announcements, basically publicly funded disinformation fighting?
Yeah. Usually they are in like news channels and things like that. They say, be aware at least of this kind of misinformation or disinformation. So
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think the Ukraine government does a pretty good job of this. I think the U.S. at the beginning of the Russia genocidal invasion of Ukraine did a really good job of declassifying intelligence and then putting it out to the world to prevent Putin from doing false flags and other kind of stuff. But it is mystifying, the decline in what I would call public diplomacy from when I first started working in the government 40 years ago. And I think part of that is just funding issues. And I think part of it is that our bureaucrats are probably somewhere between the age of most of them 40 and my age 62, and they just don't understand it. They just don't get the importance of social media. They don't understand how to deal with it. As I'm proving right now, I don't understand how to deal with it. And they just can't keep up. And the fire hose on the other side is so powerful that it's really hard for all of us to keep up. It's funded by the Russians, it's funded by the Chinese, it's funded by the mullahs in Iran. Hamas uses it, and so it's difficult for us to keep up, and it's unfortunate.
Well, I'm sorry, one more thing. Another thing is sometimes it's the actual government that's putting out the disinformation. So how can you rely on a government statement like that when, like, under, Trump administration, COVID will be over by April. I mean, things like that. It was just, you can't rely on the government for that.
Yeah, look, I'll say this. I as most of you know, ever since the moment where Donald Trump gave away Israeli top secrets to the Russians in the Oval Office, I've been a never Trumper. But I will still say that a lot of what was happening during the early days of COVID was not so much intentional disinformation as it was no one knew anything. And I think that the big rap on the Trump administration and the health professionals like Fauci at that time were they just never went out and told the American people, listen, science is a messy thing. This is a brand new virus. We don't know enough about it to reach conclusions at this moment, whatever it was, March of 2020 or March of 2020. We think that you don't need to wear masks. And also our first responders need masks. And then when the science changed a month later and they said, oh, guess what? We've done a bunch of research now. You do need masks. That would have been a much more persuasive thing than sort of claiming or implying that the science was solid the whole time. Because this is really the first time in modern history that I know of that Americans and the world have watched the scientific process in real time, which is messy. And most serious scientists that I've talked to, including astrophysicists, will say, the only thing we know for sure is that right now we're wrong about a whole bunch of stuff, and we're giving you the best information we can at the time, and we'll correct ourselves later. By the way, I just want to mention, everybody check to see if you want to have your video on, because I think there may be a few people that have their video on that don't really want it to be on. So just, just double check that.
Brian,
How do you turn it off?
I can probably, let's see, can I kill it from
You
here?
click on the video camera icon. You have a microphone. You have an X icon. You have a microphone. You have a camera, and then you have 3 dots. So the camera in the middle, if you put the line through it, your camera will be off.
I mean, I have no problem with it, but I don't want to.
Okay, now we're not watching Lauren sleep anymore. Up,
Hi.
now
Well,
she's back on.
And now she's waving to us, Lauren. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. You know, nothing against Lauren, but I'm reminded of the time when during COVID, the United States Supreme Court had to do all their hearings virtually. And they put them out. I don't know if it was on Zoom or Teams, I forget, but they basically were allowing the audio to go live. And one justice, I don't think that person's ever been publicly identified, was heard flushing the toilet in the middle of an oral argument, which is probably not the best look.
I still cannot stop laughing at the cat lawyer. That made me laugh so hard. It still makes me laugh.
Oh,
The lawyer who's a cat.
Yeah.
got a question.
Go ahead.
So we obviously know from obviously I do, because I've found proof that Putin has provided weapons to Hamas for the war against Israel, right?
Yeah.
From what I've also noticed is that many Republicans denied aid to Ukraine to help the war against Putin and the Russian state. Now, I'm looking here on YouTube, on Wiki.
By the way, speaking of a cat lawyer, go ahead.
Sorry. I've noticed here that Khan was sent a letter signed by 12 Republican U.S. senators threatening him and other UN jurists. So what if that, you know how I think in acting, and for every action, there's a reaction, good or bad. If that letter was sent by 12 Republicans that were also against, supporting, helping Ukraine, what if that was done on purpose? Now, I'm just hypothesizing, hypothetically speaking. What if that was done on purpose to get him upset in order to do what, do you understand what I'm saying? It's kind of like, it's like a psychological thing. It burns him up on the inside. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I take your point, Laura, but I think the timing is off. So the charges, the requests for warrants were brought way before the Republican senators sent their letter. So I don't discount the possibility that some U.S. legislators might try that. But in this particular case, I think, look, two things can be true at the same time, right? Like everyone who's followed me has heard me say, and I'll repeat it again, and you can go on my timeline. It's in there 4 times in the last couple of days. If Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr. and Marjorie Taylor Greene are not fully recruited assets of the Russian intelligence services, they couldn't be doing a better job for them if they were. So they should start getting paid because they're doing the work anyway. But having said that, could be senators in the United States Senate that are Republicans that are pro-Putin, but also are just doing this because they think it's the right thing to do. So I wouldn't entirely discount it. I don't think it's going to go anywhere, though, because the ICC has plenty of funding in the United States. Even if we actually did cut it off, wouldn't really change anything.
Yeah, I'm just thinking because of the way Yuri Bezmenov had mentioned with the psychological warfare and every time, you know, delegates or people would go into Russia, how they would, you know, brainwash them, or, you know.
Oh yeah, no,
You
and
know?
I'm not. I believe that is happening,
Mhm.
and I believe it's been happening for 40 years. I'm just saying this particular thing. I don't know whether that's related to that. I'm looking in the chat, by the way. Our friend Arlene says Fusilier needs to be a background narrative in many songs, and I will tell you that there is a recording. So my normal partner in crime on the WTF Spaces, William, is a little bit ill, so he couldn't join us today. But there is a we're going to turn into a little meme, us mispronouncing Fusilier's name in every possible way, and then there's going to be a little rap music behind it. So it'll probably be a stupid uncle joke, but we'll think it's funny. Because Fusilier, he's the man. Like this whole thing, this was his idea.
You know what's funny? Every time you say Fusilier, I always think, you know, like of the British, you know, army and everything. And actually, I had today the Lancaster bomber fly over my house because
you said that. Yeah.
I live close to the war, you know, the Heritage Museum here in the Hammer in Hamilton, and I just love, like, they always used to do parabolas, like they'd fly over my house and then they went back. So I've always loved watching the bomber. It was just beautiful. So.
Yeah. Why is that? Just mostly for like public events, or what? Why are they doing that?
I told you how a gentleman from the CBSA who works with immigration and also was ex-military, but he's also said that after my dad passed away, the agency, or we're always watched over because of Putin and all that, you know, what he's done and everything. So.
Gotcha. Hey, by the way, our friend Jedi Law is pointing out that this is unfortunate if this is true, but apparently if you join by that link, the camera is on by default. I actually don't know if that's right, but anyway, just whenever you get on these things, check your camera if you don't want to be on camera. And also, High 10 points out, I forgot about this. Very good point though. The CNN TV lawyer Jeffrey Toobin. Yeah, you know where this is going. I was going to make a legal joke related to his activities, but I won't do that. He was suspended for CNN for quite some time because he was on a work Zoom and he was, what's the polite way to say it? Pleasuring himself, and the camera caught it, and so this did not.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah.
Ew.
Yeah, there's definitely a dad lawyer joke in there, but I'm not going to make it right now.
Well, he got his job back, so I guess it's not such a.
Where's the jokes there?
Yeah,
I just don't understand how those two things would even go together. That's what was baffling to me.
Oh, you mean why would anyone dick around with that? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. Like at a work meeting, like what was the inspiration for him? That's so weird.
Oh God.
Who was the inspiration?
Yeah, this could go terribly wrong. So I'm gonna throw up a full stop before I go to the next topic. But now that you mention it, I noticed that Caitlin Collins, CNN's Caitlin Collins, was on Bill Maher's show on HBO, wearing a I don't even know what the right term is, a strapless top. So it was like black and it just came right here and there was no shoulders on it and just her naked shoulders. And yes, Democrats is right. She looked gorgeous. And then 24 hours later, Megyn Kelly did an entire tirade about what a bitch Caitlin Collins is. And I find it very hard to believe that was a coincidence on the timing.
Jealousy.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't say it, but I wouldn't disavow it either.
After we all stuck up for her after what Trump said about her, and then she turns right back around and is this way again.
Yeah, and we were right, to stand up for her.
Yeah.
But this could be a 12-hour discussion, but I don't understand. As I said, like I am a never Trumper after what he did to Israel, but so that's my bias. But I just don't understand why people are so loyal to him no matter what. I mean, look at what's happening right now.
We could go so far down a rabbit hole here. I don't think it's loyalty to him. I think it's disgust with the other side. That's what I think it is.
What is it with Meghan McCain?
Oh, sorry. No. Megyn Kelly.
No,
Yeah,
I'm saying also Meghan McCain, after what he said about her father, but she still carries water for him. I don't get it.
She doesn't really, but it's because the other side has gone perceived to be so far to the other extreme. That's what is driving this.
So Meghan McCain does kind of go back and forth, but let me just address Democrats' point, because I think this is super interesting, and there's like 800 people here. So I think, of course, there are people who are supporting Trump because they think Harris, Waltz are too extreme. There's no doubt about that. There must be thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. But that doesn't fully explain it, because I was in spaces, and probably many of you were too, during the primaries, where the MAGA Trump loyalists would go into these spaces and they would, number one, threaten the lives of anyone who supported DeSantis. And two, they created gang rape memes of Casey DeSantis, which they published, which my friend Monica stood up for. And guess what they did? They created gang rape memes of her, which they published. So this is not just about ideology. This is about something far more than that, in my opinion. Now, let me tell you the way I look at it right now, and I'll love to have Democrats and others push back on me, because there's probably a category I haven't thought of. As you know, guys, I look at this really in 2024. So from 2000, from 9/11 until recently, I looked at politics and our elections basically through the lens of who's less likely to get my daughters killed by a terrorist attack. Now, the way I look at it, not that I don't care about that, but I think that's a less acute problem, especially since my daughters aren't located in big target areas. I look at it as who's less likely or more likely to damage American democracy. And I think that I categorize, hardcore MAGA people now into three categories. One are people who actually don't have American democracy on their bingo card, meaning it's not an issue that means anything to them, either because they actually don't care or they just don't think of the world in that way. So that's category one. Category two are people who actually do care about the preservation of American democracy and actually are thinking about it, but they don't think Trump is a serious threat to it, either because they just say, well, he just says, he talks plainly like we do, and he likes to stir up trouble, and he's a provocateur, but he could never really do it. And then the next thing they'll say is, and the reason we know he would never do it is because he didn't do it in his first term. Not an unreasonable argument, except for he actually did try to do it with January 6th, number one. And number two, in the second term, first of all, he's got now immunity from the U.S. Supreme Court. And secondly, he's not going to have anyone around him to rein him in. There's not going to be any John Kelly. There's not going to be any John Bolton. There's not going to be any, God, I know her, and I can't remember her last name, Kristen, whatever, the Secretary of DHS. So there's that second category that says, yeah, we care about it, but we don't think he's a real threat. And then there's the third category, and I hope somebody will suggest to me a fourth. The third category, which I analogize to the character in Dante's Inferno, guys, where there was a pope who was so evil that his soul went to hell while he was still walking the earth. And that's where these third category people are. Third category is they care about democracy. They believe he's an actual threat to democracy, but they're willing to take that risk because they want their judges, they want their tax breaks, they want their positions on whatever it is. So what's the other category? Somebody tell me.
I have two more categories, at least two more.
Speak.
Okay.
Yeah, tell me.
All right. So the fourth category would be Jewish Americans and Iranian Americans who are absolutely petrified of a Harris administration kowtowing to the Islamic regime. That is a large number. There are many, I know many Jewish Democrats who are voting for Trump this time, specifically because of that.
Okay,
And
hold on, Democrats. Let me stop you. But for those people, then I would think they would have to feel either that he's not a threat to democracy, or his positions on Israel and the regime in Iran are more important than democracy.
They're rolling the dice. They're rolling the dice and hoping he will not be a threat to democracy. Many of them have some fear that he might be a threat to democracy, but they're basically rolling the dice and gambling. So that's a fourth category. The fifth category are, because the third category you described are the people who want America to just collapse. That's how I viewed it. Your third category, which would apply,
or it could be like Mitch McConnell, where he cares about having the Senate and having his judges, and he doesn't care about anything else.
Okay, sorry. So then another category would be the people who want Trump to be president to usher in a revolution, because they think he will be so toxic that the people will flood to the streets and there will be a revolution and we'll have Marxism. And then the fifth category are the people who also want the collapse of America, but want the authoritarian government. And those would be the gripers, right-wing, far-right Christian, whatever, like Lucas Gage's and those people. So 5 categories is what I see.
And as you, so I want to go back to category 4 in a second, but as you have highlighted so effectively, the really horrifying thing is that those two groups, from the far, far, far left and the far, far, far right, who want the status quo to fall, they're uniting right now.
They sure are. Yep, they sure are. Yep, they are. Forming spaces together, finding common ground in Jew hatred. That's what unites them. And they are actively pursuing a Trump presidency for that purpose.
I have a 6th category.
Do it. Bring it.
If you don't particularly care about democracy one way or the other, but you realize that Trump is for sale so you can get what you want that way, if you're a multi-billionaire who owns a social media platform.
Not to be too specific, but by the way, I think there's more than one billionaire that are in that category.
Yeah, I have two in mind.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's to me, as somebody who's 62 years old and grew up and, in my own way fought in the Cold War, it's a terrifying thing. But I do believe, Saul, that there are, I don't know how many, but too many people who just think, for whatever reason, on the far left, far right, or no ideology at all except for power, think that the best thing that can happen is absolute chaos and utter collapse of society in the United States. I think
a lot of those people are being affected by Russian and Chinese disinformation.
1,000,000%. We talked about this the other day, Democrats. I can't remember if you were there, but the John Fetterman assistant, the comms director for Fetterman, who publicly posted that Fetterman was wrong on a bunch of specific things with regard to Israel, and the reason he was wrong is he didn't have the nuance that the newer generation has to understand the world as it really is. Now, one, if I was a senator or a congressperson or a business executive and my comms director came out and said something that was the exact opposite of my policy, they would be fired. That's a cardinal sin. She wasn't elected by anyone. But the more interesting thing to chew on to me is this is a fundamental pillar of not just Soviet Russian propaganda, but Maoist propaganda. This was the whole thing, not the whole thing. It was a very important part of the Cultural Revolution in China, I don't know, 80 years ago, was that you convinced the newer, younger generation that all of their elders were corrupt, didn't know anything, were behind the times, and that they were the ones that would have to overthrow the generation that didn't know what they were doing. And, you know, as an old white guy, that's pretty scary right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, 100%. That and I wasn't there for that space, but I agree with you. I would fire that comms director immediately, and I absolutely hate the word nuance now because it's so overused. Because it's just some things are just facts. You have to look at facts as they are, and I mean it's just, oh my gosh, the nuance. Yeah.
Well, and the related terrifying thing, still don't know why I'm only allowed to have 10 people on stage, but anyway, the related terrifying thing to me is that we're just in a post-factual world. I mean, you know, there used to be a saying that you can have your own opinions, but you can't have your own facts. That's not even true anymore. You can have your own facts. And, you know, there's so many examples in the last 6 months, but one of them is when TikTok, when the CCP decided to push out this idea that Osama bin Laden was a romantic, just revolutionary figure. And all of a sudden, millions of people said, yeah, that seems right. Like, there's Google. You can go back and you can understand what happened on 9/11, and you can find his published writings, and you can find everything that he stood for. And, you know, nobody wants to bother. And I'm realizing I should change the name of this discussion to Grumpy Old Man from Saturday Night Live. But I do think it's a real risk that we're in a post-factual world.
You know what's scary for me, Brian, is when I hear of everybody or people that support the Marxist Leninist groups or that ideology, is that when you look into history of, you know, the whole, you know, Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact that Stalin had signed with Hitler, you know, in retrospect, with all of the with the concentration camps in, you know, that happened, and everybody that was killed in World War II, like, that's genocide. Don't even think about going there to supporting that kind of a thing.
Oh yeah, and as we know, there's all kinds of spaces now, and I'm sure this is happening on other social media that that I don't pay attention to. But there's plenty of spaces where groups of people of various different ideologies are explicitly embracing the idea of concentration camps and explicitly embracing the idea of political violence as a legitimate means of change. And, you know, it's always hard to know how much of X is the real world. I hope less than we think. But it's terrifying.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How do we stop it? How do we change it? How do we change course?
For me, it's
well, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say educating people about the past and what happened with the pact and everything with Hitler, and, you know, with you know, because obviously Putin's paternal grandfather was the personal chef to Lenin and Stalin. So there you go. That's where his ideologies come from, right? And it's about educating people. It's showing people what's right and what's wrong, and just to even support that. And that's this whole thing, you know, with attacking Israel. Like, do people not understand what people that were Jewish went through in the past with Hitler? Like,
yeah,
I laugh at it. They celebrate and laugh at it right now.
Well, and you'll see signs that say he didn't go far enough.
That's horrible.
I mean, I think in the U.S. and Western Europe, it's just going to be a generation. You know, as Laura knows, Bezmenov, the KGB defector, said in 1985, 86, that 84? This was the 84. This was a multi-decade effort to intentionally, carefully, slowly, methodically indoctrinate Western young people who would become the decision makers in the future to the narratives that the Russians wanted them to have. And then you layer on top of that the narratives that the Qataris want them to have when they endow these chairs and they, give millions of dollars to American universities. And then you layer on top of that what the Chinese Communist Party wants, controlling TikTok. And I think it's going to take a generation to reverse it. I think the steps that we can take, at least in America right now, would include not banning TikTok, because that's impossible. The Brazilians are trying to ban Twitter right now. It's not going to work, X. And I do think this is legally possible, and I think it will happen. And I published on this. If somebody wants to Google my name and TikTok, you'll find a bunch. I do think the U.S. government, whether the next president is Harris or Trump, can and should and likely will compel TikTok to either be run in the United States entirely by a subsidiary that's controlled by U.S. citizens who are trusted by the government, and have complete control over the algorithm in terms of what's pushed to our young people and also what private information goes back to China, or they're going to go out of business, one of the two. And so that's a step that we collectively as a country can take. I think the much more important things, though, are to, one, reestablish in our education system that the purpose of public education or private education is not to teach people what to think, but is to teach people how to think. And that has been completely lost. And I think we need to reestablish that. And then the other thing I think we can do in the short term is to just try to encourage our governments to show the world that this propaganda cannot succeed. And I do have some criticisms of the current administration around that. I have some criticisms of the last administration around that. I have some criticisms of the Western European governments around this. But we have to show that, especially with regard to what's happening in Israel and what's happening in Ukraine, that the information warfare just isn't going to work. Because at the end of the day, unless, millions and millions of people in Western democracies literally rise up and depose their governments, our elected officials still have agency. And we can still make decisions that are the opposite of what the propagandists want. So none of that is a prescription for absolute success, but I think it all would help.
I think young people today, they don't even have role models. When I was growing up, many years ago, we used to have footballers. We used to listen to them, and they used to give advice: don't do drugs and don't do this. So you used to look up to them and say, "Oh, I want to be a footballer. I don't want to do drugs. I don't want to do this."
Yeah.
Whereas today, the movie stars and the rock stars and all the pop stars, they don't speak up because they think if I do speak up, I'll be making a big loss on my revenue. So there's a lack of that. People don't have a backbone to stand up for something. I mean, do you guys remember the Bon Jovi's era where he used to go and talk about saving the world and singing about it and doing all this stuff that literally changed the world by raising awareness? I mean, that's all they did. They just went around and raised awareness, and there were a lot of people who looked up to them. Whereas today, young people, they look up to the Tate brothers, the God knows what else is out there on Twitter Spaces, and my God, some of the comments in there where they still support these guys, even though they've been accused and imprisoned a few times for all sorts of crimes, including underage children. It's beyond understanding. Like, how could you even support or defend some guy who even if he's accused of it, you wouldn't want to be associated with such people? But that is because there's a very big void where nobody else is feeling it. And who comes along? People like Tate and people like that.
Yeah.
Around
No,
Canada, there used to be even boxers, right? Boxers used to come up and say, "Come and train with us and be somebody, do something," instead of going on the streets and rioting and looting and doing all that.
yeah, 100%. And I think what social media has done. I mean, look, this is this phenomenon of Soviet slash Russian, Chinese, mullahs in Iran, Hamas propaganda. It's not a new thing, especially on the Russian side. It's been going on forever. But the difference is that now the kind of operations to influence opinion in the West that, when I was working on this stuff for the CIA would have cost the Soviets millions and millions of rubles for a very small effect. Like they would spend years trying to cultivate an asset, an agent, a human being who worked in a newspaper in India to put one op-ed, one editorial that was pro-Russia in that thing. Now, all they got to do is sit back and manage their server farms in St. Petersburg, and they can influence tens of millions of people basically for free. Like they just have to pay or threaten or incentivize the people who are sitting there at their computers typing the stuff out. And now it's getting even easier and cheaper because of AI. So it's not a new thing. It's just that it's now industrialized and it's on a global, constant, everyday, 24/7 scale. And whatever the outcome of all of our elections are in the next 6 months to a year, our governments better figure out a way to deal with this, because right now, notwithstanding all the great efforts of everybody in this room, we're kind of getting our asses kicked globally.
Well, that's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is that they're making their own citizens docile. I mean, take a look at China and Russia, for example. What's happening is in their social media, everything is solicited, or they don't see what we see. Like we don't have filters at all, whereas
True.
they've got too much filters. So
It's
what
true, but
happens then?
we can't do that in the West, though.
Of course, yeah. But my point is this, that people in China and Russia will never rise up. They're so docile. They can't even dare to say something. Like imagine in
Well,
Russia
they'd
they
be
can't say,
killed. Yeah.
yeah, they can't even say the word war. I mean, that's how insane it is. There were people who were protesting with white paper, and they were getting arrested. In China as well, they can't say anything about Xi. They can't even Google anything about the Tiananmen Square, so they have no knowledge of it whatsoever. And if if God forbid there was like a World War III, they'd be so docile and scared because they don't know the outside world. All they know is this bubble they've been fed every day, and all they see is cut videos and how to cook videos, how to be a good citizen. Whereas us, we kind of like we get this whole crazy stuff going on. So if there was a war, you kind of like, all right, well, we've seen that side and we've seen this side. We've been at each other's throats. At least we know who the enemy is. But they don't even know what to do.
Can
So
I add
it
a
could work
layer?
against
I'm
them.
sorry. Can I add
go
a
ahead.
layer to this? So in addition to like direct indoctrination via troll farms or whatever online, you also have groups that have formed to promote the same kind of ideology in a seemingly grassroots way. For example, I'll give you a couple of examples. So there's a group of Jewish studies professors, and they have a group called Jewish Studies Activist Network, where they collaborated to write op-eds to demonize Israel. These are Jewish studies professors using their academic credentials to demonize Israel, and they would write similar op-eds. They would coordinate it. They would share the op-eds with each other, and they would publish them under their names in different papers, Washington Post or New York Times or whatever the Portland paper is, LA, whatever. and they would, so it would seem organic and it would seem like it was happening on its own. But I was in their little Google group and they were actually planning that. And then there are other organizations like, and this is an organization you need to be aware of if you're not already, Brian, called the Solidarity Research Foundation. A woman named Yvette Yen Liu runs it. She seems like she'd be a member of the Junior League. She seems like a complete professional. And she is leading what they're trying to do is create a revolution in the US. She had a YouTube, I'll share it with you. It's still up on their website and on YouTube. Student Intifada panel to discuss how to, plan and plot these student intifadas. The special guests on their panel were Omar Barghouti, who founded the BDS movement, and Mark Rudd of the Weather Underground. And so, and then it was the student organizer who from JVP at Columbia and the student organizer for SJP at Columbia. So those were the 4 panelists. Yvonne Yen Liu ran it, and it is astounding what they're doing. You'll see other organizations like the People's Council of LA or People's Council. They're all related to the Solidarity Research Foundation. It's insidious. It's absolutely insidious. There are just branches and tributaries and tentacles, whatever you want to call it, everywhere. They have built an enormous, enormous web of seemingly grassroots organizations to promote this stuff, and it's terrifying.
Yeah, Democrats, DM me that because I'm going to have to leave and live my real life in a couple minutes. My wife just got home.
Absolutely, yeah.
But DM me that, and a couple shameless plugs here before we go. First of all, thanks for participating in this I was going to say embarrassment experiment. Appreciate everybody being here. I think this is a pretty interesting way to do social media. To me, it's more fun than an X space, but there are disadvantages to it also, which is right now we have a ton of people on X that don't seem to be able to message us. So I'm going to work that out. But guys, I got to ask you a personal favor. So right now I have 14,498 followers. So if some of you guys could push me over the edge to 14.5, that'd be super helpful.
On what platform?
On X. At Denver Cunning, my handle's in the chat there. I only say that because there's some people here that are on the Hidden History Happy Hour website. There's some people from my LinkedIn that might not follow me on Twitter, so that would be a super big help. But then also check out the Hidden History Happy Hour, where, as we like to say, we have a drink, we have a laugh, and you just might learn something. I do it with a Tory politician in the UK, great guy. We talk about obscure moments from history, and we drink what our characters would be drinking, and we try to have a little fun. Hope to see you guys all there. On the WTF front, you guys can see these on my timeline, but we have an episode coming up Monday that has to do, I think it's Monday. Yeah, Monday, that has to do with the U.S. criminal court cases around Donald Trump. And this is not even announced yet, but you guys are going to want to see this. On Wednesday, we're having a Military Intelligence 101 space with Malcolm Nance, Fusilier, Eric Shore, and possibly a few special guests. So I hope you guys will all tune in for that. And I hope you enjoy this experiment.
Awesome. Thank you always, Brian.
Thank you, Brian, and everyone else who was here. You guys
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks.
And that sounds really great. I'd love to be there. Make sure I
See you there.
send me a DM. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.